Today I am portraying Lucretia Worden, and she was a little 11-year-old when her mother and father came by covered wagon from the east. Their names were Miller, and they stopped because Mrs. Miller was expecting a third child. And so they stopped at Hellgate and thought they would wait until that baby was born. And then they never left. And matter of fact, her mother and father are buried right across the road here. Well, this Lucretia was the second child, the middle child. And you know how middle children are. And she would hang around the store, the Hellgate store, 4 miles west of our current city of Missoula. Well, Mr. Worden was 34. There was 17 years difference in their ages. But when she was 14, he went and asked the parents if he could marry her. And they said yes. So at 14, Mrs. Worden started her career and had 7 children. Mrs. Sterling, who is right over there, married Fred Sterling, was the oldest, Lucinda. And then the second oldest was Henry Worden, who is my husband's father. And Henry is right there, and his wife, Mary Jordan. And then there were other children. There was one more son, Frank, and Frank is down there with his wife, Ida. So there were the 2 boys, and then the 5 girls. All of them, with the exception of Henry, had this beautiful education. She was very, very good at business. Mr. Worden died and left her with these 7 children, and the youngest was Aunt Ruth, who was right behind me here, and she was 6 months old. Mr. Worden contracted pneumonia putting in the water system that we use today in Missoula, although the wooden pipes have been replaced. You will see there's a woman up the Rattlesnake, and I'm sorry, she was here last year and she didn't give me her name. She said, oh, I've collected all those pieces, but all along the west side of the Rattlesnake, if you'd walk along, every once in a while you'll run across a wooden pipe that carried the water. But he contracted pneumonia and died as a very young man and left her with these children. Now, the house at 328 East Pine was their house. It was built in 1870, and I have that house currently. And that's where she raised her children, and apparently she must have been a wonderful businesswoman, because they kept the water company until she died in 1913, and that's when the water company was sold to Montana Power, and then currently now to Mountain Water owns it. But they've been an interesting family, and I do think that she has been probably the backbone, what I've read of her. Now her one daughter, Carolyn, married Joe Dixon, who is a young lawyer from North Carolina, came up here. And they live next door, and that's the KC house now. Mm-hmm. And there's pictures in some of the books on Missoula, some of Stan Cohen's books, where that was a 1-story house, and then they had these 6 children, and all of them are buried right here, just about, the Dixon children. And so they were next door, and then they added on to that house when they had all the babies. And the Dixons they're wonderful, fun people. And then the Sterlings, Lucinda Sterling, I live in that house. That's at 1310 Gerald. It's an apartment house. And I was just talking to Mary Glime, the woman representative, said, did you know about the bed Mr. Sterling bought from Mary Glime's estate for $150? And I said, yes, I did. And Mrs. Sterling, it goes, never slept with him again. But anyway, that's just a little bit of information. That could be hearsay. Who knows? Who knows? Anyway, but they've been a very interesting family, and I think Mr. Worden was a visionary. He was much more interested in the citizenry and that type of thing. And of course, Mrs. Worden was on one of the first cemetery boards and helped design the cemetery out here. So it's, I think I'm getting most of it straight. None of them have come up to correct me, which is comfortable. So, but they're an interesting family. And of course, one of the Dixons married our famous, Dorothy Dixon married Bill Allen, who was the Lolo of Lolo fame, who was president of Boeing Aircraft. And they're, Bill Allen and Dorothy are buried on the other side of the Dixon plot here, and then the Sterlings are all here. I mean, the gang's all here as it goes. So, but I have the homespun that came across in that covered wagon at my house. You know, so it's been so much fun to be part of this family, because they're interesting, and you know, they've got a wonderful history behind them.
Can you tell the story about the safe that is...
Oh, the safe?
Yeah, because I can't remember that.
Well, the safe was brought up from Mr. Worden was raised in Vermont, and as a young boy, his mother sent him down to be with her brother, Lyman Powers, in Troy, New York. So what they did, they trained him to be a merchant. And at 18, he borrowed $300, and he got on the, I assume the Hudson River, went to New York, and then went down around the Horn and up into San Francisco. And he tried his hand at gold mining, and wasn't very good at that. But he was a merchant. That's how he'd been trained. And so he started to sell supplies to the miners and that type of thing. Well, then he started a store in Walla Walla, and that's where the safe came from originally. It's back in Walla Walla. My son is a stockbroker, and his office is across the street from where the Worden and Company store was. And I sent the safe to Walla Walla with Hank, and it's in his office.
Now, wasn't it held up, or there's some story?
Oh, yes. Oh, I know what story you're talking. You're talking about the Skinner gang.
Yes.
Oh,
right.
The Skinner gang. Oh, they came through, and they came out to Hellgate, and here was this big old safe. You know, it stood about this high, you know, this big, and had $60,000 worth of gold dust in it. And they heard that the Skinner gang was coming. They were going to go up to Canada. They were on the way to Canada. And so they were kind of prepared for this. And they came in, and Skinner sat on that safe, and all the money in it. They were out at the store, you know, talking and stuff. And the vigilantes came and ran them off. So, but that's where the safe is. And I thought that was an appropriate thing to do. Hank loves the history of it, and there's only 2 Worden boys, my 2, and then Hank has 3 little boys carrying the Worden name. He has the Francis Lyman Worden IV. Really? Isn't that fun? And he has a Henry O. Worden III, and then he has a Timothy Patrick. But the safe, I thought that was a very appropriate place to put it, where it'll be seen and where it'll be treasured and in the family. The museum had it here in Missoula, but you know, they only do their Missoula things about every 5 years, so I took it back. It was on loan to him, and I'm very pleased that Hank wanted it, you know, and it's appropriate in Walla Walla. I don't think it would have been appropriate in Ephrata or Spokane, but I felt it was a very appropriate place to have it with somebody that loves what it represents. So.
Thanks. Yeah.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Glad we found you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm glad you came.